This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're talking about an 83-year-old man who's been alone for a quarter century, minds his own business, lives without excess, built everything he owns through decades of labor. In the past 12 months, 2 women have asked him to marry them. The first one said it plainly, she wanted access to his pension. The second approached more carefully, but he read her intention. She was after the property. He's not famous, he's not wealthy beyond reason, he's simply a man who lived long enough to become prey. And if you're anywhere close to 60 with a mortgage-free home and steady income, brother, they're looking at you next. Here's what nobody mentions about aging with your finances stable. You become noticed again, not the way you were at 25, not that kind of visibility. This is calculated. Women who dismissed you completely in your 30s, 40s, even 50s, suddenly they register your existence. Suddenly you're compelling, suddenly you're dependable and grounded. All these descriptions that sound flattering but translate to one reality: you possess what they failed to accumulate, and they didn't construct it themselves. Now listen, I'm not claiming every woman who approaches you past 60 is executing a plan. That would be absurd, and we both understand that. But enough of them are that you need to recognize the patterns, because the ones running this operation, they've refined it. They've practiced before, and they're banking on one vulnerability above everything else: your isolation. And let's speak truthfully about what that isolation actually resembles. You invested decades being the anchor, the problem solver, the man who appeared, stayed quiet, and managed everything. And somewhere in that span, maybe after the marriage ended, maybe after she died, maybe just after years beside someone who stopped acknowledging you, you vanished. Not physically, you're still present, but nobody registers you anymore. You move through a store and you're unseen. You occupy a stool at a bar and nobody engages. You attend a gathering and everyone asks how you're managing, but nobody actually absorbs what you say. That's not just isolation, that's erasure, and it alters something in a man. So when someone finally does register you, when a woman makes eye contact and holds it, when she responds to something you said and makes contact, it's like moisture after endless drought. You don't question the source, you just absorb it, and that's precisely what she's counting on. So before we continue, let me give you a number that clarifies everything. Women retire with 40% less in their pension accounts than men. 40%. Now, there are multiple explanations for that. Career interruptions, compensation disparities, whatever. We could analyze the causes endlessly, but here's what matters for this discussion. That gap is substantial, and it doesn't resolve itself at 62 when expenses persist. So what do you do when you're facing down 20 or 30 years of retirement and your account balance says good luck? You locate someone whose balance says welcome aboard. That's not malicious. That's calculation. Cold, functional calculation. The issue is it's your calculation she's solving with your resources, and she's not revealing her process. So how do you identify it? How do you distinguish between a woman who authentically wants companionship and one who's already mentally rearranging your space and plotting to add her name to your title? That's what we're dissecting. Not to make you suspicious, but to make you conscious. Because the men who got destroyed, they all express the same thing. I recognize the warnings. I just refuse to acknowledge them. Let's ensure that's not you. Let's establish something clearly. Most of these women don't believe they're doing anything unethical. In their perception, they're not executing fraud. They're securing stability. They're being intelligent about their future. They invested 30 years raising children or working positions that didn't compensate adequately or trusting a man who abandoned them with nothing, and now they're simply adjusting. And honestly, I comprehend it. I'm not here claiming every woman past 50 is corrupt, but understanding her circumstances doesn't mean volunteering to resolve them with your accumulated wealth. Here's the underlying mechanism. She's not approaching you because you suddenly became attractive. She's not approaching because she finally perceives the authentic you. She's approaching because you represent the single element she lacks: a funded retirement. You're not a companion, you're a pension with vitals. Absorb that for a moment. Now, here's why you specifically. Not younger men, not financially struggling men. First, you're appreciative. After years of being invisible, maybe a disconnected intimacy, maybe a divorce that devastated you, maybe losing your wife and existing alone in that structure. When a woman materializes and actually demonstrates interest, it registers as positive. It feels like finally. And that appreciation, that's the opening she enters through. Second, you're less defended. A 30-year-old man with resources, he's been cautioned. He's absorbed the warnings, the broadcasts, the disaster accounts. He's protected. But you developed in a different period. You want to trust people are authentic. You want to believe she appreciates you, not your holdings. That's not fragility. That's just being human, but it's also the vulnerability she's exploiting. Third, and this one's uncomfortable, you're nearer to the endpoint. I don't express that to be grim, I express it because it's part of the equation. She doesn't require 40 years with you. She requires 10, perhaps 15, perhaps less. She just needs to survive you. And statistically, she will. One man in this community shared something that resonated with me. He'd been seeing a woman for several months. Nothing binding yet, or so he believed. Without warning, she inquires about his will, not whether he possesses one. She wanted details on what it contained, who received what. Then she proposed, real casual, that perhaps she and her adult children should be incorporated. You understand, since things are progressing well, her adult children, whom he'd encountered twice, several months of seeing each other, and she's already attempting to integrate her entire lineage into his estate documents. He withdrew. Smart man. But here's the reality, how many men wouldn't? How many would interpret it as, well, she's just being forward-thinking, or that indicates she envisions a future with me? That's how the operation functions. It disguises itself as dedication. Now that's the mechanism, that's the motivation, but knowing motivation doesn't shield you. You need to recognize what to observe. So let's get concrete. 5 indicators she's not present for you. She's present for what you constructed. All right? 5 indicators. And I'm not discussing she seems somewhat questionable intuitions. I'm discussing concrete, observable, document these behaviors. Some you'll recognize. Some might anger you because you've already witnessed them and refused to acknowledge what they signified. Let's proceed. Sign 1. The financial examination arrives early. You're on encounter 2, coffee. Things are pleasant, and somewhere between what music do you prefer and have you traveled extensively? She introduces, so are you retired? Do you own your residence? Now look, isolated, that could be innocent dialogue, but observe what occurs next. Does she transition or does she investigate? Oh, you own it completely, no mortgage. Remarkable. That's uncommon these days. A pension and Social Security. You really strategized ahead. Do you have children? Are they involved? She's not making casual conversation. She's completing a spreadsheet mentally. One man expressed it perfectly. It resembled less like an encounter and more like a financing application. If you're being interrogated about your net worth before she's inquired about your preferred film, that's not curiosity. That's research. Sign 2, she contributes nothing but arrives demanding. Here's an inquiry nobody wants to pose, but everyone should. What does she actually possess? Not what does she provide emotionally. That's simple to fabricate. I mean tangibly. Savings, property, a retirement account, anything. Because here's the pattern. She's 58 and she possesses nothing. No assets, no strategy. Maybe some debt she's unclear about. But what she does possess is extensive discussion about partnership and constructing together and caring for each other. Sounds appealing, real appealing, except you already constructed. You invested 40 years constructing. What precisely is she contributing to this partnership besides her existence? And I understand how that resonates. I understand it sounds harsh to inquire, but you know what's harsher? Awakening at 75. Recognizing you financed someone else's retirement while she contributed what? Companionship? You can acquire a dog for that, and the dog won't request to be incorporated to your deed. But here's what makes this worse. It's not just that she possesses nothing, it's that she might be introducing negative value, debt. I'm discussing debt. Credit cards maximized, medical expenses she's vague about, a vehicle payment she neglected to mention, maybe an underwater mortgage from a residence she lost in her previous divorce. One man on a legal platform shared his account, dated a woman for 12 months, things became serious, discussed cohabitation. Immediately before they executed a lease, she disclosed about $200,000 in debt. $200,000. She framed it as transparency. I wanted you to understand everything before we proceeded with this step. Like she merited recognition for the admission. But consider the timing. She delayed until he was emotionally invested, until departing felt like sacrificing something, until $200,000 could be reframed as our obstacle to address together. That's not transparency, that's tactics. So when you're evaluating her, don't just inquire what she possesses. Inquire what she owes and observe how she responds to the inquiry. If she becomes defensive, if she labels it invasive or claims you're being unromantic, brother, you just received your response. Sign 3. Your people become the obstacle. This one's subtle, and it's the one that'll damage the most if you overlook it. Observe how she discusses your family, especially your adult children. Initially, it's minor elements. They're so protective of you. I comprehend it, but it's excessive, don't you believe? Do they genuinely need to be involved in every choice? I just sense they don't grant us space to be us. Then it intensifies. Your daughter's constantly questioning. It's like she doesn't trust me. Maybe we should skip Thanksgiving with them this year. Keep it uncomplicated. Why does your son need to understand our business? Here's what's occurring. Your children perceive something. They're posing questions she doesn't want posed, so she needs them removed, or at minimum distant enough that their alarms can't reach you. A woman who loves you wants your family proximate. A woman who's executing an angle needs them at distance. Observe how she manages the people who've known you longest. That reveals everything. Sign 4. She's accelerating for documentation. Marriage, combined accounts, beneficiary modifications, adding her name to the residence. Now, in an authentic relationship that's developed over years, these discussions make sense. That's normal. But if you've been together 8 months, and she's already discussing what occurs if something happens to you, that's not planning, that's positioning. The deed is the significant one. Watch for it. Wouldn't it be simpler if I was on the title for tax purposes? If we're genuinely committed, why maintain things separate? I just want a sense like this is our residence, you understand? One man from a legal advice platform. He possessed a prenup, believed he was protected, but he allowed her attorney to manage the deed documentation. Seemed simpler. She acquired the entire residence when he died. Children received nothing. Prenup didn't signify anything because the deed was already in her name. Documentation is authority. Don't surrender it because it feels romantic in the moment. Sign 5. Her timing is suspiciously ideal. When did she materialize in your existence? Immediately after your wife passed. Immediately after your divorce finalized. Immediately after a health crisis. There's a reason for that. These are the moments you're most vulnerable, most receptive, most willing to believe someone cares. And the ones executing the play, they understand this. Some of them monitor for it. That church woman with the casserole 3 days after the funeral. The old acquaintance who suddenly heard what occurred and wants to reconnect. The woman from the dating platform who seems so understanding about your loss. Maybe it's authentic. Maybe. But ask yourself, where was she 6 months ago, 12 months ago, when you weren't wounded and vulnerable and searching for something gentle to land on? If she materialized at your lowest moment with open arms and no history, that's not destiny. That's opportunity. Those are the 5 indicators. You probably recognized at minimum 1. But here's the reality. Knowing the indicators isn't sufficient if you don't comprehend where this all leads. What's the actual objective? What is she constructing toward? That's where this becomes dark, and that's where we're proceeding next. Here's what most men don't grasp. She doesn't need to divorce you. Everyone worries about divorce. Prenups, asset protection, maintaining things separate. And yes, that material matters. But the women who are genuinely skilled at this, they're not contemplating divorce court. They're contemplating outliving you. And I don't intend that in some dramatic crime documentary way. I mean the calculation, the literal actuarial calculation. Women survive longer than men. Average is approximately 5 years longer. If she's already younger than you by 10 or 15 years, she's not strategizing for a divorce. She's strategizing for a funeral. Your funeral. Consider what that transforms. If she divorces you, attorneys get involved, courts divide things. Your children might still receive something. There's a confrontation. But if she's your wife when you die, or even just your cohabiting partner with the correct documentation, there's no confrontation. There's just transfer, the residence you paid off in 1998. The retirement account you fed for 40 years. The life insurance policy with her name now on it. She doesn't need to scheme her way through a courtroom. She just needs to be standing there at the conclusion holding the correct documents. And the disturbing part, she can be genuinely pleasant to you the entire duration. She can make you content. She can be quality companionship for your final years. None of that alters the calculation she executed before she ever expressed, "I love you." And that's the component that disturbs your perception because it doesn't resemble a scheme. There's no villain speech, no moment where she errs and exposes the master strategy. She's preparing you meals. She's inquiring about your day. She's being warm in bed. She's introducing you to her acquaintances and calling you her blessing. And all of it can be authentic. She can genuinely appreciate your companionship and be positioning herself for the transfer. Those 2 elements aren't mutually exclusive. That's what makes this so difficult to perceive from inside. You're searching for a monster, but monsters are simple to identify. What you're addressing is just calculation. Her calculation. operating quietly in the background while she's massaging your shoulders and asking what you want for dinner. She's not evil, she's practical. And the most dangerous component, she might not even fully acknowledge to herself what she's executing. In her perception, she deserves this. She's endured difficult periods. She's finally discovered a quality one. She's earned the positive conclusion. The fact that the positive conclusion is financed by your 40 years of labor, that's just details. Let me share about a man who believed he executed everything correctly. He was cautious. He'd been damaged before. So when he entered a new relationship in his 60s, he insisted on a prenup. Attorney drafted it. Everything clean and separate. He believed he was protected, but here's what occurred. She convinced him it made sense for her to be on the residence deed. Just for practical reasons, she expressed, in case something occurs and I need to manage things quickly. He figured, what's the harm? They're together. He trusts her and the prenup covers everything anyway. Her attorney prepared the deed documentation. He signed. When he died, his children received nothing. The prenup protected his other assets from divorce, but she wasn't divorcing him. She was surviving him. And the residence, the largest thing he owned, already possessed her name on it. One signature, one line, 40 years of labor transferred because he confused a prenup with actual protection. And that's the objective. Not drama, not some dramatic confrontation where she exposes her master strategy, just patience, documentation, and a box of tissues at your funeral while she contacts the real estate agent. So what do? How do you protect yourself without becoming some suspicious individual who can't appreciate his own existence? That's what we're addressing now. Because there is a method to stay receptive without being foolish. All right, deep breath. I just invested the previous minutes alarming you significantly. That was intentional. You needed to perceive it clearly. But here's the reality. I'm not attempting to transform you into some paranoid recluse who recoils every time a woman smiles at him. That's not protection. That's just a different kind of confinement. The objective isn't to avoid connection. The objective is to stop confusing attention with affection, to understand the distinction between a woman who wants you and a woman who wants access to you. So let's discuss how to actually protect yourself without becoming bitter in the process. First, time is your optimal filter. A woman executing a scheme possesses a timeline. She needs things to advance, she needs commitment, cohabitation, documentation, and she needs it before you start posing too many questions. A woman who actually loves you, she's got nowhere to be. So decelerate it, way down. No cohabitation for at minimum 12 months, no financial entanglement for 2, no estate modifications until you've witnessed how she manages a crisis, a disagreement, a moment when she doesn't receive what she wants. Time exposes everything. The ones executing a play can't afford to delay. The authentic ones won't object. Second, keep your family proximate. Remember sign 3, how she attempts to isolate you from the people who understand you best? Reverse that. Utilize it as an assessment. A woman who's legitimate will want your children to appreciate her. She'll make the effort. She'll tolerate the questions, the skepticism, the protective energy, because she understands it originates from love. A woman who's scheming, she needs them removed. They're the witnesses. They're the ones who will express, Dad, something's incorrect, so listen to them. Your adult children aren't envious. They're not threatened by your happiness. They're observing a dynamic you can't perceive because you're inside it. One man's daughter communicated 5 words that preserved his entire estate. Dad, she asks about money. That's it. She just noticed something and expressed it aloud. And because he listened instead of becoming defensive, he started observing. Your family's not the adversary. They're the early warning system. Third, comprehend what you're actually risking. Here's something one of you wrote in the comments that resonated with me. It's remarkable how much less money I require when I don't possess a woman in my existence. Read that again. This isn't about being miserly. It's about executing the calculation honestly. What does partnership actually cost you? Not just money, time, energy, peace of mind, freedom to make choices without a negotiation. Now weigh that against what you receive. And be brutally honest about whether the exchange is balanced. If this perspective provided you clarity on patterns you've sensed but couldn't articulate, understand that you're not isolated. Millions of men are navigating these precise dynamics right now, attempting choices that will affect the remainder of their existences. The objective isn't to reject women or avoid relationships entirely. The objective is to make informed choices grounded in reality rather than performance, on patterns rather than promises, and on what someone has demonstrated historically rather than what they claim they've become recently. You deserve a companion who genuinely selects you, who desires you authentically, who commits to you because they want you specifically, not because you're the optimal available option when their preferred choice is vanished. Don't accept being someone's acceptable option. Don't commit your resources. your future, and your emotional investment to someone who's performing temporary adjustment driven by financial urgency rather than authentic transformation. If you've encountered a woman past 35 in her "I'm ready now" phase, drop "encountered" in the comments if you dated one or avoided if you recognized the dynamic and walked away. Let's measure how widespread this actually is. And if this provided value, subscribe. This channel exists to deliver truth about relationship mechanics that mainstream narratives actively conceal to keep you confused and making decisions that serve everyone except you. The truth might sting, but it's far less damaging than discovering it after you've already committed everything.